In this video, we're going to talk about how your subconscious is killing your manifestations. But by the end of this video, I want to make sure you have all the tools you need to overcome the self-limiting beliefs. I want you to redefine your concept of self, and I want you to have tools to effortlessly manifest and effortlessly create a better life for yourself. So in 2022, I started a clothing brand that did $500,000, and I happened to go $80,000 in debt. After that, I started a business that did $1.3 million last year, and I sold it, so I'm left with nothing. And I'm going to talk about how these self-limiting beliefs and these self-imposed ideas of who I am and who you are actually the thing holding you back. Now, the first thing I want to do is define our concept of self, because our concept of self is going to be the thing that places a ceiling on the success we allow ourselves to have. It's going to be the thing that prevents us from attaining whatever we want from this life. So what is our concept of self? We know self can be divided in two different ways. It can be our ego, our limiting beliefs, and the ceilings we set on ourselves. It can be our identity. But there's also another side to that. We can have a positive image of ourselves. This positive image of self can be the potential we see, the evolution to be had. It can be the success that is a byproduct of who we are. But if we have been identifying with a negative version of self consistently, then we are creating a subconscious program. And this subconscious program is going to be the thing killing your manifestations. Now, the one thing that I really am going to kind of base as the theme of this video is going to be how to expand your concept of self. Expanding your concept of self is going to be the thing that unlocks the amount of abundance you want to have in your life. Now, how do we expand our concept of self? Because in spirituality, there's a saying that is to know thyself. Now, to know thyself is not to seek external validation of who you are. It's to remove the limitations that prevent you from getting to where you want to go. Now, I'm going to take this down to the fabric of our existence, to break down the concept of self and to break down the concept of who we are. And it's going to be the thing I talk about in a lot of my videos, because it's going to be the one thing that you truly need to understand and you truly need to get a grasp on in order to understand the concept of self. Now, this is the electron cloud. And this is a subatomic particle. Now, what makes this so special is that the electron cloud exists as a wave and a particle simultaneously, which means it exists as nothing and everything at the same time. Now, this is where we start to build upon the concept of a paradox, right? This is where we experience duality. This is where we experience good, bad, the back and the forth. But what if I told you that those are not separate experiences, that they are actually the foundation of the universe itself? Now, one thing Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about, a lot of scientists and neuroscientists have come to conclusion in the quantum field, is that it takes an observer to collapse the electron. Meaning, for it to go from a wave to a particle, to go from potential energy, to go from 99.999% energy to collapse into the physical world, it requires an observer, which means that we are responsible for observing the reality we want to experience. Now, when we observe the reality we want to experience, this is where the concept of self comes into play. Because if we have a negative understanding of the concept of self, if we say, hey, I'm never going to make this money, I'm never going to have that healthy relationship, I'm never going to get in shape, then that's true. You're collapsing that 99% energy into a particle, but identifying with that concept of self. Now, we know in order to experience something better for ourselves, it's about frequency. It's about how can we transmutate our energy into a higher place, remove the limitations in between where we are and where we want to go, and collapse the experience we want to have. Now, the one thing I want to introduce you to that expands upon this concept of self is going to be how we overcome these subconscious programs, how we overcome these negative versions of ourselves in service of a better future. Now, there's something called the spectrum of consciousness. So I just described how our subatomic particles are 99.9% energy. Simplified, this is the energy map of frequency, right? How do we categorize our resonant frequency in our consciousness, in the universe? Now, the only thing that I want to show you is at the very bottom is fear, doubt, anxiety, guilt, all the things that we often experience in our subconscious because we do not have the proper sense of self. We have not expanded our concept of self to better serve an outcome. Now at the top, the most powerful frequency in the universe is pure consciousness, but we're going to call that the Tao, the T-A-O, Taoism. I'll put PC right here so you know it's pure consciousness. The highest frequencies in the universe, the things that are more energy than matter, resonate at a lot quicker of a pace, meaning that they exist outside of the spectrum of matter. And that when that electron cloud I just drew slows itself down into matter, that's how we have a physical experience. But we know that the physical experience in the lowest frequencies in the universe are the same as the positive ones. It just depends what you allow your frequency to resonate at, which is why your concept of self is so important. Because we know the subatomic particles are both waves and particles. So the wave and particle is the mirror. When people talk about the mirror effect or the mirror principle, we know that it's actually the same being. It is the immaterial world, it is the material world. It is where the nothingness becomes something, becomes everything. So inherently, there is no separation between what is created and creation itself, right? This is why in the Bible they say man was created in the image of God. Now God is the source of creation, right? That infinite potential, that quantum field, however you want to identify with it. But the whole point is that when we can truly transcend the concepts of identity, when we can truly go back to a state of pure presence, then you can start to manifest more for yourself. You can start to channel a higher frequency. Now, I want to introduce you to the one thing that's preventing you from attaining effortless success, but most importantly, sustainable success, right? That's one thing I've learned over my journey over the last few years is that it's a lot different to maintain it than it is to attain it, right? To maintain something means we need to naturally be at that resonant frequency. Now, when we are at this naturally resonating frequency, it's coming through us. It is our natural state. So how can we make this our natural state? So we know that the quantum field is the electron cloud, and the electron cloud slowed down in the frequency is the world. So this is inherently no separation, right? This is a back and forth type of experience. We're going to draw this in a multitude of ways so you can see it. So the world is matter, right? Those big, long waves. The spiritual world is nothingness. It is literally pure potential, meaning that it does not exist until collapsed. In order to collapse this, we need to observe a certain reality, right? But if we do not understand the core fundamental principles about how to make this sustainable, then the success will never remain because we have not truly aligned with an understanding that allows us to make this natural. Now, this is where we're going to get into paradoxes and dualities because that's the thing that keeps us back and forth. This is a visualization that I always kind of like to do for the duality of man. So, we have good things that happen in our life, right? We also have bad things that happen in our life. This is the thing that actually keeps us stuck. This is the thing that keeps us from preventing long, everlasting success. Because if we attach to the good things, then we're always chasing a fleeting concept. We're always going to be like, where's that next hit of dopamine? Where's that next hit of validation? And when something negative happens, we're going to run away from it. We're going to repress. We're going to fight it. We're going to want less of that experience. This is why it's a paradox. Because to not want a negative experience creates resistance. And to want a positive experience inherently creates a negative one. Because you're feeding the spectrum of energy. You're feeding the energy pendulum that goes back and forth. Now, how do we transcend this? How do we exist outside of this realm in order to attain effortlasting success, to align with the reality we want to experience, to resonate at a frequency that makes this permanent in our life? Well, the first thing you need to let go is the idea of permanence. Because life, at a fundamental core spectrum, is all waves, meaning there are ups and downs, meaning this is going to be the natural experience we have. Now, if we know that we collapse an experience into reality through observing it, what type of reality do we want to collapse? And this is where life itself enters a flow state. When we allow the good and the bad to take shape, when we do not feed that energetic pendulum, then you start to experience life. You start to create it instead of become a victim to it. This is what Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about when he says you have to go from a state of victimhood to a state of creation. Because if you're always relying on this external source, if you're always relying on this imagery of the external world to be the thing that derives pleasure, to derive happiness, to derive validation for our experience, then you're always going to feed that energy pendulum. You're always going to be chasing something. You're always going to be running away from something. This is why spiritual enlightenment and revelation is actually a deep understanding about our sense of self, a core sense of understanding that, hey, we are the universe experiencing itself. Now let's break this down a little more. So we talked about the good and the bad, but how do we start to expand this concept of self to serve the experience we want to have? We're going to keep this graph up. Let's say we've come to this realization that, hey, we are both the good and the bad. We start to experience non-duality. And non-duality is present. What is the present? It's the quantum. We start to resonate at the frequency of infinite potential. This is the death of all fighting. We start to embody the entirety of the spectrum. We are no longer a victim to the creation. We transcend that concept and exist outside of that spectrum. Now, when we start to do this, you can slowly come back to the moment. You can let go of the things that no longer serve you. And when we start to let go of these things that no longer serve you, we exist. And when we exist, we are in perfect harmony with the universe. This is what the Tao is. The Tao means the way. And in the concept of Taoism, there's something called Wu Wei. This means effortless action. Doesn't that sound amazing? How can we exist in a state of effortless action, where we have everything we want without even trying? That's when we exist outside of the paradox. When we stop chasing, when we stop trying to attain something, you can truly come to the realization that you are God. You are the dream and the dreamer. You are the creation and the creator. That there is no separation in that sense of self. There is no separation in that identity. And when we truly understand this concept, life starts to flow through us. This kind of hit me today, and it was just really eye-opening. We always talk about the concept of spiritual flow. Let's actually break down that concept. Spiritual flow is to let the Spirit flow through you. How do we get to that place? We get to that place by letting go of the negative emotions that don't serve us. We get to that place by letting go of the negative things that do not serve us. That's what surrender is. When everyone talks about detaching, when everyone talks about letting go, this is actually what it means. It means letting go of the illusion of the physical world. That is 0.0001% of the experience. But it also means letting go of the 99.9% energy that we are, the potential that we are. And when you truly let go, you stop feeding that pendulum and you start to experience that flow state. You understand that the present moment is neither inherently good or bad. It's just the natural state of the universe, chaos and order. The waves go out for the tide to return to the ocean. You do not need to force a tree to grow. When you plant a seed and you nurture it with proper sunlight and you give it water and you devote an environment to experiencing this type of growth and flourishing, nature naturally takes its course. And that's the biggest thing I want you to take from this, is that it's not about attaining something. It's not about achieving something. It's not about manifesting something. Your subconscious is killing your manifestation because you do not truly understand your concept of self. To evolve this concept of self is to fully separate from the illusion and realize that everything you are seeking exists now. You no longer need to seek something when you are. Being precedes knowing. This is a state of being. This is the present moment. This is the mirror. This is what we experience in the material world, right? Energy, frequency, matter, it all collapses into a manifestation of infinite potential. But this is what that infinite potential is. It's the present moment. It's the quantum field. It's the Tao. It's the natural state of being that just takes different shapes and sizes. And your subconscious, when you can start to slowly detach and let go and surrender from your identity of self, that, hey, those grades don't define me, that, hey, that $80,000 of debt I got into doesn't define me, that, hey, I used to smoke way too much weed, and that used to be something that was a deep paralysis for me, but that even no longer defined me. You can truly just come to a moment of presence, and that is where you experience peace. And when you experience that peace, you experience the abundance. Now, when you are naturally in this place, it is the death of all fighting. And when it is the death of all fighting, you can truly engage of the act of creation. And the act of creation is when we start to manifest. And when we manifest, that means we have become a pure vessel for truth to come through us, for the highest frequency to come through. Now let's break this down. Listen, I'm lazy. I want effortless action. So let's say this is the quantum field. This is the infinite potential. We come from the stardust. Everything's energy. And over here lies the money we want, the love we want, the experiences we want to have with our finite source of time. This is the material world. But after talking about the electron cloud, we know that this is the illusion. And when we can understand this is the illusion, we understand that everything starts in the realm of spirit. Now, how can we bring the highest forms of spirit into the material world? And this comes back to overcoming subconscious programs. So let's say that this divider down the middle is your identity. This is your ego, your limiting beliefs. It's the program. This is where we're trying to just decipher what's going on. But let me show you what happens. If we remove the programming, if we remove the limiting beliefs, if we remove the ego, we start to exist. This is the present moment. This is the creator, this is creation. This is the duality. And this is where we allow life to flow through us into the material experience, because it's the source. And when we get out of the way, we allow the most natural, harmonious, resonant frequency to come through, which is pure potential. It's everything you can want and more. Think about it. Odds are, a lot of our wants, a lot of the things we want to manifest stem from a place of scarcity, stem from a place of fear. And when we can truly overcome this, we start to experience everything we want. The abundance naturally flows to us. The love naturally flows to us. The experience naturally flows to us, because this is who we are. It is our natural state. There is no longer any separation. You become what you were seeking. And when you become what you were seeking, you naturally attract that into your life. Now, even me, this is a revelation. I'm still naturally developing. So here's some applicable advice. It's advice I'm trying to take into my own life. How can we live from the end? This is what they talk about manifestation, right? So 1, gratitude. Now the issue with most people in gratitude is they're grateful for what they have. But if you want to manifest, Dr. Joe Dispenza talks about being grateful for things yet to come, because then you use your thoughts and emotions to create an experience. And your brain can't tell the difference between the physical and the immaterial world. That's what I've been trying to describe with all the art. Now, living from the end, to some degree, is yes, experiencing gratitude for what you have, but it's also living from truth, which is to know thyself. And you have to understand, this is going to be a natural, integrating journey. You're not just going to wake up overnight and have fully integrated into your concept of self. It's taken me 4 years, 5 years to even remotely start to scrape the surface on something like this. But the one thing you need to take with you, and the secret, is to just let go. When you truly let go, it is the death of all fighting. The water will naturally flow from the mountain down to the riverbank. You do not need to change anything about that. It is the natural state. And when it is the natural state, we can live from the end, because there is nothing to be attained. It is the experience we were seeking. And that is when you truly overcome your subconscious programming that is killing your manifestation. And you start to exist at the resonant frequency of creation itself. And when we exist at that resonant frequency, we truly embody everything we want and more. More love comes into our life because we emanate and embody that frequency of love. More wealth comes into our life because we emanate and embody the frequency of abundance. More experience comes into our life because we are not experiencing life, life is experiencing us. So I encourage you to not fight the pendulum of the paradox, to not engage in duality, but to just become the observer of it. To realize that when you can overcome that back and forth, you can overcome that energetic spectrum, you can truly be. And what they say is being precedes knowing. When being precedes knowing, that means that our natural state and our actions and how we live and who we are exists before any concept of understanding, right? There needs to be an action to be understood. Something had to happen for us to know about it. And that in order to get to a proper place of being and to truly be ourselves, the highest frequency in the universe is authenticity. We just took an interesting route to write that out, but it's authenticity. Because it is our natural state. It is one of one. When you expand your concept of self and my ideas of my failures, my ideas of my addictions, my ideas of my worries, guilt, anxieties, all dissipate, what's left? Your concept of self will always be there. It is the thing that has no beginning and no end. This is one thing I'm going to be devoting myself to, trying to spend each day I can in states of discipline to understand this concept. But I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to chase it. I'm going to realize that the understanding and the knowing ebbs and flows. But to be it requires no thought. It requires no action because it is our natural state. So the one thing I want to leave you with is you do not need to change anything about who you are. You actually just need to let go of who you're not. So if you like this video and you're ready to keep increasing your levels of wisdom and unlock a more abundant and successful concept of self, drop a like, drop a subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.